For the estimated 25% of the US workforce who have seen their work shift to be fully remote, or for those leaving jobs in search of more fully remote work, there's a new trend that could double your salary. And it's simple. Work 2, or sometimes more, full-time remote jobs at once and in secret.
My household income was probably 300, 400,000, somewhere there before, and now we're over $1 million. People think of those numbers as really big numbers. It's not possible. I think it's just a mindset thing.
In a survey published in October of 2021, nearly 40% of remote workers admitted to having 2 full-time jobs. This movement has been dubbed overemployment, and an entire community has popped up to help navigate their secret double lives, with advice like what you can use to be on 2 Zoom calls at the same time, or how you can avoid burnout by being mediocre. Proponents believe that, for some, it can unlock both more money and less stress. But for both employers and employees, can multiple remote jobs be a sustainable part of our future of work? Trends in multiple full-time employment, of course, only apply to certain industries.
There are, of course, some industries like healthcare and restaurants and travel that simply can't be remote. But with the exception of those, many have the ability to work from home.
Client-facing roles or jobs that require in-person attendance can't be done simultaneously, unless they operate in completely different hours of the day. But that leaves a lot of room for knowledge workers in sectors like technology and finance.
People have gotten a lot more efficient working from home, and so that has reduced the working day to some degree and has probably allowed for, especially software developers, for instance, to work another job perhaps because they've saved on time.
Recent research found that 31% of tech professionals admit to putting in just 3 to 4 hours of work a day, with one anonymous Facebook employee saying that they put in less than 1 hour of work if you don't factor in all the hours of meetings.
A lot of people in the overemployed community are in accounting, finance, insurance, sales. Obviously, software developers are kind of at the forefront of the community and still is the most remote-friendly job, just from a supply and demand reason.
This is the voice of Isaac. He runs the website overemployed.com, a site dedicated to give resources and promote the idea of working multiple full-time jobs. And being someone who himself claims to work 2 jobs, he has asked us to keep his name, voice, and image anonymous.
Overemployed really just stemmed from me trying, it out myself, talking to several different lawyers, looking at my employment contract and seeking knowledge and permission, if you will. And then I happened to talk to a family member who was just, chuckled at the idea and said that she knew many people that were doing it. And it's been the biggest open secret out there. I was like, okay.
For some, it may be surprising to know that what people like Isaac are doing doesn't necessarily violate any laws.
Generally speaking, there's no law that would prohibit an employee from having 2 jobs at once. At most, it can be a violation of an employer policy. There are some employers who have what they call no moonlighting policies. Some are a complete ban on outside employment. Some say no outside employment that interferes with your job duties or conflicts with what you do for the employer or with the employer's business.
Nevertheless, those who have 2 jobs often go to great lengths to hide that fact.
I tend to have a very defined structure on how I structure my days. My days actually very busy being a dad. That's my number 1 priority. And then I fit work in kind of 90 minutes, sprints, I call them, or 3, 4 of them throughout the day to focus across, 1 job or 2 job 1 or job 2, and get what I need to get done there. One thing is never mix the hardware, if you will. Keep it completely separated and standalone.
Don't use your employer's property, their laptops, computers, printers, paper, whatever it is, to perform work for the other employer. And don't ever lie about not having the job, because employers can, fire employees for dishonesty, no matter what it relates to.
Some companies are catching on to potential moonlighters, using tools like artificial intelligence or productivity monitoring software that can track employee engagement with various tools like monitoring how much your mouse is moving during the day. But even for these obstacles, the overemployed community has, solutions. And while technology can help keep some of these overemployed workers from legal issues, they also need to be aware of their own mental load.
When you're thinking about two jobs and when you're thinking about the implications of having two jobs, not just in terms of responsibility, but in terms of the psychological load of having to lie and having to hide, I think it depends on your unique situation. It depends on how hard it is for you to do that, especially when we know that psychologically, when you feel guilty about something, it's like the pressure of being found out can almost be excruciating.
This is Rahaf Harfoush, a digital anthropologist and researcher who recently wrote a book on hustle culture and burnout.
We're playing all of this overemployment stuff on the backdrop of a global pandemic, of opening and closing borders. We're already pretty stressed. Many of us are already pretty stressed managing enough uncertainty. So if that's not your personality, adding yet another giant bundle of uncertainty that could have legal, financial, reputational consequences, it would just be something that I would advise that a person would really think through because, all the money that you could earn, if it ends up tanking your reputation in industry or having legal consequences and stressing you out so you can't even enjoy your time off, those are the hidden costs that we need to take a look at.
I think that's just a misconception that people have that if you do multiple jobs, you must be overworking. You don't have to. If you're productive and thoughtful about how you allocate your time with deep focused work, etc.
As Isaac explains, having two jobs, at least in his experience, has actually reduced the stress around his work.
I haven't found it stressful, but to each their own. One of the nice side effects of virtual remote work is, with 2 jobs or 3 jobs or whatever, if you don't like a meeting, you don't have to go to it. See what happens. Just say to client, can I get the meeting notes? If that meeting was wasting your time and wasn't adding to your bottom line results that you're tasked to produce, you can stay why. And I think a lot of the overemployer are kind of leading some of the charge and pushing back with overworking. That a lot of people with one job are overcompensating actually and overworking because they're worried about their job. And that's why they're the ones that are going to meetings 12 hours a day back to back. It's a choice. It just really comes down to it's a choice of what you do with your time.
And taking that time back is a mindset shift that is at the core of what the proponents of overemployment believe. Detach yourself from your job, don't wrap your identity into work, and strive to simply meet expectations, not exceed them.
In our work culture, we have the sociological phenomena called work devotion, which is a set of behaviors that we all do, that we've all done, that signal to our colleagues and coworkers that we deserve our success. So what ends up happening is their sense of self-worth becomes intrinsically linked with how hard they work, with the type of job that they work. And then it's not even about the job that they have, it's about how hard they're working for that job. What we've actually been seeing research-wise economically for years is that people are working really hard. There are some people that are working 2 and 3 jobs, not overemployment, just 2 to 3 jobs in the gig economy, part-time work, and still are not able to make ends meet. And so for me, I think if you are going to do this and separate your sense of self from your job, if that's what it takes for you to say, hey, I am not my job title, that maybe I want to be present and joyful and healthy and happy and have relationships, I think that's great.
And even if it is possible to work 2 full-time remote jobs, it likely isn't going to be for everyone. But it does point to a larger trend happening in work overall, a shifting perspective on our work-life balance.
When the pandemic happened and lots of people lost their jobs, a lot of people were slow to come back to their employer, or there was just this psychological shift where they were rethinking the type of work that they wanted. And that resulted in a labor shortage. And so now people have this power to negotiate and sort of get the type of work that they want.
As the economy recovers, workers have used this new power to find better working accommodations, in a movement that some have been calling the Great Resignation.
We really saw this idea of the Great Resignation start in the middle of last year. And this was as unemployment benefits started to kind of unwind and people were going back to jobs that they had before the pandemic. But they realized that the hours were very rigorous, for example, or that the work was not positioning them for the future that they wanted. We've moved away from 40 hours a week at your desk, 9 to 5, and toward people having more autonomy over how they want to shape what their careers look like long term.
And for some in the overemployed community, growing your income the traditional fashion by being promoted can look less attractive. For example, according to Glassdoor.com, the average total pay for a software engineer is about $156,000 per year at Google and around $166,000 per year at Meta. And while senior software engineers make significantly more money, it still isn't as much as having 2 more junior roles.
If you have a full-time job, you have one source of income. And if based on continuing economic disruptions, layoffs are becoming more and more common across industries. So does it make sense for you to devote all of your time and your extra time into one company where one day you can come into the office and suddenly it's like, guess what? No more job.
This has just sort of opened a door for people to navigate employment in new ways, but it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to be able to sustain 2-3 jobs at a time for many years, because as we mentioned, burnout is a real thing. And even if you can do it for a year or so, it doesn't mean you can do it, once you've got children or once you've got other responsibilities that kind of take time out of your day.
I think you're going to find that there are people that are going to be engaging in overemployment for very different reasons in very different ways. If there's one thing that we can take away from overemployment, it's this idea that we have more control over our time than we think. There are things that we believe to be true about working, about our day-to-day, about our calendars, about our relationships with our teams and our bosses that are the way they are because we've never questioned them, because that's just how they've always been. So the more interesting thing to think about is where can I do things a bit differently? Where can I explore new ideas or try new things or test out new concepts? And maybe by doing that, you'll start to shift and realize that your work reality is whatever you make.